As soon as the storm fell silent, when the howling winds that had battered your fragile settlement for 7 endless days finally exhausted themselves into stillness, you and the 43 other colonists emerged from your snow-buried shelters to discover that hope could exist even in the endless cold, even in a world painted entirely white, even when the temperature hung so low that each breath formed crystals before your eyes, and the land stretched unbroken and frozen toward horizons you could not see. You stand at the entrance of the main shelter, your hand pressed against the rough timber frame that somehow held through the storm. The silence feels almost violent after so many days of shrieking wind. Your ears ring with the absence of sound. You take a slow breath, feeling the cold air slice into your lungs with that familiar sharp edge. The year is 1632, and you are part of a small group of English and Dutch colonists who attempted to establish a settlement on the coast of what some call New Friesland, far north of any successful colony, where the Arctic ice meets dark water for only a few brief months each year. The storm arrived 3 weeks after your ship departed, leaving you stranded with supplies meant for a coastal trading post, not a winter encampment. Your leader, Captain William Bradford, made the decision to shelter in place rather than risk the journey back to established settlements. That decision may have saved you, or it may have doomed you. Time will tell. You step fully outside, and the world reveals itself slowly. Snow covers everything in smooth, undulating waves. The storage shed you helped build last month has vanished entirely beneath a drift. The 3 smaller shelters where families sleep huddle like white mounds against the hillside. Only the thin trails of smoke rising from ventilation holes betray human presence beneath all that frozen weight. The cold wraps around you immediately, searching for openings in your layered clothing. You pull your wool cloak tighter and adjust the fur-lined hood that frames your face. Your breath clouds thickly in front of you, hanging in the still air before slowly dissipating. The temperature must be far below freezing, though you have no instrument to measure it precisely. Colonists in these northern regions learned to gauge cold by how quickly exposed skin began to sting, how rapidly breath froze on beards and eyelashes, how soon fingers grew numb despite heavy mittens. You take a few steps away from the shelter, your boots sinking deep into fresh snow. Each step requires effort, lifting your foot high before planting it again. The snow reaches past your knees in places. You scan the white landscape, searching for the others. A figure emerges from one of the buried shelters, brushing snow from their shoulders. Then another. Soon, several colonists stand scattered across the settlement, each one moving slowly, testing the world that the storm left behind. Thomas Fletcher, the settlement's carpenter, wades through the snow toward you. His beard has frozen into icicles where his breath touched it during the short walk. "The main shelter held," he says, his voice rough from days of breathing dry, cold air. "But we'll need to dig out the storage shed before we can assess our supplies." You nod, understanding the weight behind his words. The supplies in that shed represent survival. Salted meat, dried fish, grain, root vegetables packed in sand. Without them, the 44 souls in this settlement will face starvation long before spring arrives. "Gather everyone who can work," you tell Thomas. "We'll need to organize teams. Some to dig out the storage shed, others to check the shelters for damage, and a few to scout the area for any game that might have survived the storm." Thomas nods and turns to relay the message. You watch as he moves from shelter to shelter, his figure becoming smaller against the vast whiteness. The sky above holds a peculiar quality, a pale blue so light it almost appears white. No clouds remain after the storm's passage, just endless, clear sky that promises even colder temperatures tonight. More colonists emerge as Thomas spreads the word. You recognize Sarah Miller, a young woman who left London with her husband and infant son. She carries the child bundled so completely in furs that only his small face shows, pink against the white world. Her husband, John, follows close behind, carrying a wooden shovel over his shoulder. Margaret Walsh appears next, an older widow who joined the expedition as a cook. She moves carefully through the snow, testing each step. Behind her come the Morrison brothers, Peter and James, both strong young men who worked as dock laborers before seeking fortune in the colonies. William Bradford himself emerges last, from the largest shelter where he and his wife Mary stayed with several other families. Even after days trapped inside, he maintains a certain dignity in his bearing. He surveys the settlement with calculating eyes, already planning, already measuring what must be done. "The storm has passed," William announces, his voice carrying across the snow. "But our test continues. We will organize into work parties. No one works alone in this cold. Stay in pairs at minimum. Work for 20 minutes, then return to warm yourselves by the fire. Frostbite can claim fingers and toes before you realize the danger." The colonists gather near the main shelter, forming a rough semicircle. 44 people, ranging from old Margaret at 60-some years to baby Daniel Miller at barely 4 months. Each face shows the strain of the past week, the fear worn down to quiet determination. You count them silently, relieved that everyone survived the storm intact. William assigns tasks with practiced efficiency. The Morrison brothers will lead the effort to uncover the storage shed. Thomas Fletcher and 4 others will inspect all structures for damage. Sarah's husband John and 3 more will attempt to hunt, though finding game after such a storm seems unlikely. The remaining colonists, including women and older children, will gather in the main shelter to prepare hot food and maintain the fires. You find yourself assigned to the storage shed team. The Morrison brothers have already begun the work, using wooden shovels to move snow in steady, rhythmic movements. You join them, taking a shovel from the pile of tools that someone dug out from near the main shelter's entrance. The physical work warms you quickly. Within minutes, you feel sweat forming beneath your layers, though the air temperature remains brutally cold. You develop a rhythm, scooping snow, tossing it aside, stepping forward, repeating. The snow is lighter than you expected, powdery and dry. It flies away from your shovel in glittering clouds that catch the weak sunlight. Peter Morrison works beside you, his breath coming in steady puffs. "Never seen snow this deep," he says between scoops. "Even in the worst London winters, nothing like this." You agree silently. This cold is different from anything you experienced in England or even in the southern colonies. This cold has weight. It presses against you, patient and relentless. After 20 minutes of steady work, William calls for the first rotation. You return to the main shelter gratefully, your fingers tingling despite thick gloves. Inside, the contrast is stunning. A large fire burns in the central hearth, built carefully to vent smoke through a hole in the roof. The warmth hits you like a wave. Margaret Walsh ladles hot broth into wooden bowls. The smell makes your mouth water. You accept a bowl and drink slowly, feeling the heat spread through your chest and belly. The broth is thin, mostly water, flavored with a small amount of salted meat and dried herbs, but it restores you better than any feast. Around the fire, colonists share quiet observations about the storm's aftermath. Mary Bradford mentions that one of the smaller shelters has a collapsed corner where snow weight proved too much for the roof support. Thomas Fletcher is already planning repairs. Someone else notes that the well they dug before the storm is completely buried. Finding it again will require careful measurement and digging. After 15 minutes warming yourself, you return outside for another work rotation. The temperature feels even colder now that you've experienced the shelter's warmth. Your breath freezes immediately, forming a white cloud that drifts slowly in the still air. The storage shed gradually reveals itself as the team digs deeper. First, the peaked roof appears, its timber frame intact. Then the upper walls emerge, showing no signs of collapse. Relief flows through the group. If the shed held, the supplies inside should be protected. It takes most of the morning to fully uncover the entrance. When Peter Morrison finally pulls open the heavy wooden door, everyone pauses, holding their breath. Inside, the shed is dark and cold, but intact. Barrels of salted meat stand where they were placed. Sacks of grain lean against the walls. The root vegetables in their sand-packed crates show no signs of freezing. "It held," Peter says, his voice filled with quiet amazement. Everything held. The news spreads quickly through the settlement. By midday, when the weak sun reaches its highest point, a cautious optimism begins to replace the fear that gripped everyone during the storm. The shelters survived. The supplies remained secure. No one suffered serious injury or illness during the 7 days of confinement. William Bradford calls a meeting in the main shelter after the midday meal. Everyone crowds inside, sitting on log benches or standing along the walls. The fire crackles in the hearth, casting moving shadows across faces weathered by cold and hardship. "We have survived the first great test," William begins, "but winter has only just begun. The storm we endured was severe, but it will not be the last. We must use the calm that follows to strengthen our position here." He outlines a plan. First, repair all damaged structures and reinforce those that showed weakness. Second, establish a routine for gathering firewood, as fuel will determine survival through the long winter. Third, attempt hunting and fishing through the ice to supplement stored supplies. Fourth, begin preparing for the possibility of an even longer winter than anticipated. Someone asks about rescue. When might ships return to this coast? William's answer is honest and harsh. No ship will attempt these waters until late spring at the earliest. The settlement must be self-sufficient for at least 4 more months, possibly longer. The meeting ends with quiet determination rather than despair. These colonists knew the risks when they chose this venture. They came seeking opportunity in a land that promised rich fishing, valuable furs, and trade with indigenous peoples. The storm was a setback, but not a defeat. Over the following days, the settlement establishes new rhythms. Each morning, colonists emerge into the brutal cold to perform necessary tasks. Firewood gathering becomes the most important daily work. Teams venture into a nearby stunted trees, cutting wood and dragging it back on crude sledges. You join these wood-gathering expeditions, learning quickly that even small distances feel enormous in deep snow and extreme cold. The trees grow sparsely here, twisted by constant wind. Each trunk must be carefully selected, cut, and processed. The work leaves you exhausted, but the growing woodpile beside each shelter provides comfort. Thomas Fletcher leads a team in constructing a better ventilation system for the main shelter. Smoke inhalation during the storm caused several colonists to develop persistent coughs. He designs a clever arrangement of wooden channels that draw smoke upward while allowing fresh air to circulate. The improvement makes the shelter noticeably more comfortable. The hunting team, led by John Miller, reports limited success. They find rabbit tracks and manage to trap 2 small hares. The meat, though meager, represents fresh food that boosts morale more than calories. Margaret Walsh makes a stew that feeds everyone at least a few spoonfuls of meat in their broth. Perhaps most importantly, several colonists begin exploring the landscape beyond the immediate settlement. They discover that a river, frozen solid now, runs less than half a mile to the east. Beneath the ice, fish almost certainly wait. The prospect of ice fishing brings new hope. Peter Morrison volunteers to attempt the ice fishing. He spent time in Norway before joining the expedition and claims knowledge of the techniques required. William approves the attempt, and Peter begins preparing tools. You watch as Peter fashions an ice chisel from a long iron rod, working it into a point on one end. He explains that you must chip through ice that might be several feet thick, creating a hole large enough to drop a line through. The work will be exhausting, but the potential reward justifies the effort. The Norwegians taught me to feel for the fish, Peter says, working the metal with steady hammer blows. You lower a line with a piece of bright metal or bone on it. The fish see it moving and strike. When you feel the tug, you pull up quick. The next day, Peter and James Morrison set out toward the frozen river, carrying the chisel, several lengths of line, and hooks fashioned from carved bone. You join them, curious to see if this technique will work. The walk to the river takes nearly an hour, wading through snow that sometimes reaches mid-thigh. Your legs burn with effort, and your breath comes in heavy clouds. The cold seems to intensify the farther you travel from the settlement's fires. When you reach the river, Peter selects a spot where the current ran strong before freezing. Fish gather where moving water was, he explains. Even under ice, they remember. He begins chipping. The sound of metal striking ice rings across the frozen landscape, sharp and clear. Each blow sends ice chips flying. Peter works steadily for 20 minutes before William's rule forces him to rest. James takes over, maintaining the rhythm. It takes 2 hours of rotating between the brothers before the chisel finally breaks through. Dark water wells up into the hole, quickly forming a rim of new ice around the edges. Peter drops his line immediately, a piece of polished bone tied to it as a lure. For long minutes, nothing happens. The three of you stand in the brutal cold, watching the dark hole in the ice. Your feet grow numb despite thick boots. Your face stings where exposed to the air. Just as you begin to doubt, Peter's line jerks. "Got one," he says calmly, already pulling hand over hand. The line comes up steadily, and then a fish breaks the surface, silver-scaled and surprisingly large, thrashing as Peter lifts it clear. The fish freezes almost immediately in the air, its movements slowing, stopping. James whoops with joy, the sound strange and loud in the silent landscape. Peter grins, already baiting his line again. There's more. There's always more where there's one. By the time the cold forces you back to the settlement, you carry 3 fish, each one large enough to feed several people. The return journey feels lighter despite the added weight. When you arrive and display the fish, the colonists gather around in wonder. That night, everyone receives a small portion of fresh fish, steamed over the fire and seasoned with precious salt. The taste, after weeks of dried and salted stores, seems like a miracle. Children laugh for the first time since the storm ended. Adults smile into their bowls. William Bradford speaks briefly before the meal concludes. This fish represents more than food. It shows that this land, harsh as it is, will provide if we learn its ways. The ice is not our enemy. It is our road, our table, our foundation. His words sink deep into your mind as you finish your portion. You realize he's right. The cold that seemed so threatening has also preserved your supplies. The ice that trapped you has also provided fish. The snow that buried your shelters also insulated them from even colder air above. In the weeks that follow, the settlement develops more sophisticated strategies for living in the extreme cold. Thomas Fletcher builds a small forge where metal tools can be maintained and repaired. The heat from the forge provides an additional warm space where colonists can rotate through when working outside. Margaret Walsh begins experimenting with ice storage, discovering that meat and fish buried in snowbanks near the shelters stay frozen solid and protected from scavengers. She creates an organized storage system, marking each cache with a stick so items can be retrieved even after new snowfall. The Morrison brothers establish a regular ice fishing rotation. Every few days, a team visits the river to fish through the holes they maintain. The steady supply of fresh protein makes a significant difference in everyone's health and spirits. You take on the responsibility of monitoring weather patterns. Each day, you observe the sky, the wind, the quality of the cold. You begin to notice patterns. When the air feels sharp and dry, storms rarely follow. When moisture hangs heavy, bringing a different weight to the cold, storms often develop within a day or two. This knowledge helps the settlement. One morning, you notice the sky taking on a peculiar gray quality. The air feels heavy. You report to William that a storm may be approaching. He orders all outdoor work to cease, all shelters to be checked and secured, and all colonists to prepare for another period of confinement. The storm arrives that evening, though less severe than the first. It lasts only 3 days, and the settlement weathers it with much greater confidence. When silence returns again, the colonists emerge to find less snow than before, the world still difficult but manageable. The rhythm continues through the darkest weeks of winter: work, rest, warmth, cold, food, sleep. Each day resembles the last, but in that repetition, strength builds. About 6 weeks after the first storm, a new challenge emerges. Several colonists develop persistent coughs that produce thick mucus. Margaret Walsh recognizes the symptoms as lung fever, a dangerous condition in the best circumstances, potentially deadly in the cold. Mary Bradford is among those affected. William keeps her near the fire constantly, ensuring she breathes warm, moist air. Margaret prepares poultices and hot drinks from the limited herbs in storage. The sick colonists rest as much as possible, but rest is difficult when cold penetrates even the warmest shelter. You volunteer to take extra shifts maintaining the fires, keeping them burning hot to warm the air for the sick. Others join you, and together you ensure that each shelter maintains sufficient heat day and night. The illness spreads despite precautions. Within a week, nearly 15 colonists show symptoms. Fear creeps back into the settlement. Lung fever killed many on the voyage here. In this remote place, with no physician and limited medicine, each cough sounds like a threat. Thomas Fletcher proposes building a dedicated sick shelter with enhanced ventilation and a larger fire. If we concentrate the sick in one place, we can warm the air better and care for them more efficiently, he argues. William approves the plan. Despite the cold, the healthy colonists work rapidly to construct the new shelter. They use wood from the cargo ship that brought them here, timber intended for trading posts that now serves a more immediate need. The sick shelter is completed in 4 days. It stands slightly apart from the others, with a large central hearth and carefully designed ventilation that draws fresh air while expelling smoke and moisture. The sick are moved there, bundled in every available blanket and fur. Margaret Walsh essentially lives in the sick shelter, tending to those affected. She prepares steam inhalations by heating water with herbs, having each patient breathe the vapor. She monitors their temperatures by touch, keeping careful mental notes on who improves and who weakens. You bring firewood to the sick shelter multiple times each day, ensuring the fire never drops below a steady roar. Each visit, you see the pale faces of the ill,
their eyes hollow from fever and fatigue. Mary Bradford rallies one day, then weakens the next.
Sarah Miller's infant son develops a troubling cough despite his mother's constant care. The crisis lasts 3 weeks. 2 colonists succumb despite all efforts: an elderly man named Richard Cooper and a young woman named Elizabeth Turner. Their bodies are wrapped in canvas and buried in the frozen ground with great difficulty, the earth resisting every strike of the pickaxe. William Bradford leads simple services for both, his words honest about the harshness of their situation, but firm in his belief that their sacrifice serves a greater purpose. "We build something here," he says, over the frozen graves, "something that will outlast all of us. Each life given here waters the soil of a future settlement." Gradually, the remaining sick begin to recover. Mary Bradford's cough lessens. Sarah's baby stops wheezing. One by one, the colonists return to the regular shelters, weak but alive. Margaret Walsh herself finally rests after weeks of constant care, collapsing into an exhausted sleep by the fire. The settlement emerges from the illness with deeper bonds. Those who tended the sick earned profound gratitude. Those who recovered felt renewed appreciation for survival. The 2 deaths, though mourned, were somehow accepted as part of the price of this northern venture. As late winter approaches, you notice the days beginning to lengthen. It's subtle at first, barely noticeable, but each day the sun lingers a few minutes longer above the horizon. The light, though still weak, carries a different quality. William notices too. "Spring will come," he tells the gathered colonists one evening. "Perhaps not for many weeks, but it will come. When it does, we will have survived something few thought possible." The knowledge that spring exists, even far in the future, changes the mood in the settlement. Conversations around the fire begin to include plans for the warm months. Thomas Fletcher talks about building proper structures with foundations and glass windows. The Morrison brothers discuss expanding the fishing operation. Margaret Walsh mentions planting a garden. You find yourself imagining the landscape without snow, the river flowing freely, green things growing from the dark earth. The vision seems impossible, yet you know it must have happened before. The stunted trees near the settlement prove that life persists here, even through winters like this. One morning, you venture beyond the usual paths, exploring farther from the settlement than anyone has gone since the first storm. The sun shines brightly, though it provides little warmth. The sky stretches brilliant blue above, and the snow glitters so intensely it hurts to look at without squinting. You walk for over an hour, following a ridge that overlooks the frozen landscape. From this height, you can see for miles. The settlement appears tiny, a few dark spots against endless white. The river runs like a pale scar through the snow. William notices too. "Spring will come," he tells the gathered colonists one evening. "Perhaps not for many weeks, but it will come. When it does, we will have survived something few thought possible." The knowledge that spring exists, even far in the future, changes the mood in the settlement. Conversations around the fire begin to include plans for the warm months. Thomas Fletcher talks about building proper structures with foundations and glass windows. The Morrison brothers discuss expanding the fishing operation. Margaret Walsh mentions planting a garden. You find yourself imagining the landscape without snow, the river flowing freely, green things growing from the dark earth. The vision seems impossible, yet you know it must have happened before. The stunted trees near the settlement prove that life persists here, even through winters like this. One morning, you venture beyond the usual paths, exploring farther from the settlement than anyone has gone since the first storm. The sun shines brightly, though it provides little warmth. The sky stretches brilliant blue above, and the snow glitters so intensely it hurts to look at without squinting. You walk for over an hour, following a ridge that overlooks the frozen landscape. From this height, you can see for miles.
The settlement appears tiny, a few dark spots against endless white. The river runs like a pale scar through the snow.
Beyond, mountains rise in the distance, their peaks sharp against the sky. As you scan the horizon, movement catches your eye. Far below, near the edge of the frozen river, something dark moves against the snow. You shield your eyes and squint, trying to make sense of what you're seeing. The dark shapes resolve into figures, animals, large ones. You count 5, then 7, then more. A herd of caribou, perhaps, or some other Arctic species you don't recognize. The animals move slowly across the snow, their heads lowered, searching for vegetation beneath the frozen surface. They stay together in a tight group, clearly adapted to this harsh environment in ways you and your fellow colonists are still learning. You watch them for several minutes, memorizing their location, their movement pattern, their numbers. This information could be vital. Fresh meat from a successful hunt could feed the settlement for weeks, stretching the stored supplies farther. You turn and hurry back toward the settlement as quickly as the deep snow allows. The return journey takes longer than the outward walk, as you're traveling uphill and fighting fatigue. By the time you reach the main shelter, you're breathing hard and sweating despite the cold. William Bradford listens to your report with intense interest. "How far?" he asks. 2 hours walk, you estimate, maybe more with the terrain. He calls for John Miller and the Morrison brothers, the settlement's most experienced hunters. They gather around as you describe what you saw. Peter Morrison nods thoughtfully. "Caribou," he says. "Has to be. Nothing else moves in herds like that this time of year. They're grazing on lichen and frozen moss. If we can take even one, the meat alone would be worth the effort." William considers. It's risky. A 2-hour journey in this cold, then the hunt itself, then bringing the meat back. If a storm develops while you're out there, "We can watch the weather," you interrupt. "The sky is clear, the air is dry. I've seen no signs of an approaching storm." William looks at each face in turn, measuring their determination. Finally, he nods. "Prepare carefully. Take enough supplies for 3 days in case you must shelter away from here. Go armed and stay together. If the weather turns, abandon the hunt and return immediately." The hunting party assembles quickly. John Miller leads, with the Morrison brothers and 2 other men named Robert Shaw and Henry Cooper. You ask to join, and William approves, noting that you know where the herd was last seen. Each hunter dresses in their warmest clothing and carries a pack with dried food, extra mittens, and tinder for fire. You carry long spears tipped with iron points, as well as several knives. The plan is simple. Approach the herd carefully, select a target, coordinate the strike, and bring down the animal as efficiently as possible. The journey out takes longer than expected. The hunters move more slowly than you did alone, and the weight of supplies tires everyone. You reach the ridge where you spotted the caribou after nearly 3 hours of steady walking. The herd has moved, but their tracks in the snow create an easy trail to follow. You descend from the ridge and track the animals eastward along the frozen river. After another hour, you spot them again, perhaps 30 animals grazing in a sheltered hollow. John Miller signals everyone to stop. You crouch in the snow, observing the herd from a distance. The caribou appear completely unaware of your presence, focused entirely on finding food beneath the snow. Several younger animals stay close to larger ones, likely calves staying with mothers. "We take one of the larger ones," John whispers. "Not the biggest, those are likely breeding males we need to leave, but a good-sized female, something that will give us plenty of meat." He points to an animal near the edge of the herd. "That one. Robert and Henry circle left. Peter and James circle right. We'll approach from 3 sides.
When I signal, we all move together. The hunters separate carefully, moving with practiced silence. You stay with John, creeping forward through the snow. Your heart pounds despite the cold. Everything depends on coordination and speed. The approach takes nearly 30 minutes. Each step must be placed carefully to avoid making noise that might spook the herd. You watch John's face intently, waiting for the signal. When it comes, everything happens fast. The 6 hunters rush forward from 3 directions. The herd reacts immediately, animals scattering in panic. But the targeted caribou hesitates a crucial second, and that hesitation costs it. John's spear strikes first, catching the animal in the chest. Peter's spear follows, and then Robert's. The caribou stumbles, tries to run, but cannot. It collapses into the snow. The rest of the herd disappears over the ridge, their hoofbeats fading quickly. The hunters gather around the fallen animal, breathing hard. The caribou is large, perhaps 300 pounds. Its dark eyes stare upward, already glazing. Steam rises from the spear wounds where hot blood meets frozen air. "We did it," James Morrison says, his voice a mixture of disbelief and triumph. John kneels beside the animal. Now the real work begins. We need to field dress it quickly before the meat freezes solid. Everyone spread out, watch for scavengers. Wolves will smell the blood. The processing takes over an hour. John and Peter do most of the butchering, their knives working efficiently through hide and muscle. They remove the internal organs, setting aside the liver and heart as valuable food. The meat is divided into portions that can be carried. By the time they finish, the sun is dropping toward the horizon. William's warning about weather echoes in your mind, but the sky remains clear. Still, spending a night out here in the open would be extremely dangerous.
We need to move now, John decides. We'll take as much as we can carry and mark this spot. We can return tomorrow for the rest if the weather holds. Each hunter straps bundles of meat to their backs. The weight is considerable, and the journey home will be exhausting. But no one complains. This meat represents life, strength, hope. The return journey tests everyone's endurance. You walk for an hour, then rest for 10 minutes, then walk again. The sun sets, and you continue by starlight. The meat on your back grows heavier with each step. Your legs shake with fatigue. Finally, after what feels like endless walking, you see the settlement's fires glowing in the distance. The sight gives you strength for the final push. You stumble into the settlement well after dark, exhausted but successful. The colonists gather immediately when they see the meat. Children stare wide-eyed at the quantities of fresh caribou. Margaret Walsh organizes storage, directing where each portion should be placed. William Bradford clasps John Miller's shoulder in gratitude. That night, everyone receives a portion of fresh meat. The taste, after so long surviving on salted and dried stores, seems almost unreal. The meat is tender, rich, sustaining. As you eat, you feel strength returning to your body. The hunting party rests the next day, recovering from their exertion. The day after, they return to the kill site with sledges and retrieve the remaining meat as well as the valuable hide. Nothing is wasted. The hide will be tanned and made into clothing or shelter repair materials. The bones will be carved into tools. Even the sinew will be dried and used for sewing. The successful hunt marks a turning point. The settlement proved it could not only survive the cold, but thrive within it. The fear that dominated after the first storm gives way to cautious confidence. As winter continues, the colonists develop routines that feel almost comfortable. Ice fishing provides steady protein. The caribou meat stretches over weeks. Firewood supplies remain adequate. The shelters hold against repeated storms.
People begin to talk not just about surviving until spring, but about what they will build when warm weather returns. Thomas Fletcher draws plans in the snow, sketching the layout for permanent structures. "We'll build with stone foundations," he explains to anyone who will listen. "Proper chimneys, multiple rooms, real beds off the ground. This settlement will be a town within 5 years." The Morrison brothers discuss establishing a formal fishing operation when the ice melts. "We could catch enough fish to trade with other settlements," Peter says. "Salt them, pack them in barrels, ship them south. There's profit in these waters." Even Margaret Walsh, the cautious widow, who initially doubted the entire venture, begins planning a garden. "The growing season will be short," she admits, "but certain crops thrive in cold climates. Potatoes, turnips, hardy greens. We could supplement our diet significantly." You find yourself drawn to these conversations about the future. The endless white landscape that once seemed only threatening now appears full of possibility. The cold that nearly broke you has instead forged you into something stronger. One evening, William Bradford calls everyone together for what he calls a reckoning. The colonists gather in the main shelter, faces curious about this meeting. "We arrived here in late autumn," William begins. 47 souls seeking opportunity in an unknown land. We lost 3 during the voyage and 2 more to illness here. 42 remain. Each of you has proven your courage and determination beyond any measure I could have imagined." He pauses, letting his words settle. "When spring comes, we will have a choice. We can seek passage south, returning to established colonies where life is easier, or we can stay, building something new in this harsh but resource-rich land. I want each of you to consider this question in the months ahead. No one will be forced to stay, but neither will anyone be forced to leave." The question hangs in the air long after the meeting ends. Around individual fires, in quiet conversations, the colonists debate their futures. Some argue passionately for leaving. The cold has been too harsh, the isolation too complete, the risks too great. Others argue equally passionately for staying. They've invested too much, learned too much, survived too much to abandon it now. You wrestle with the question yourself. Part of you longs for warmth, for green landscapes, for the familiar rhythms of more temperate climates. But another part, perhaps the stronger part, has fallen in love with this stark world. The clarity of the cold, the purity of the snow, the simple truth that each day survived is a victory. As February passes into March, subtle changes accumulate. The sun rises noticeably earlier and sets later. The quality of light shifts, becoming brighter, carrying more warmth even though temperatures remain well below freezing. Snow begins to consolidate, becoming denser, harder. One morning, you hear a sound you haven't heard in months: dripping water. You step outside and discover that the southern face of the main shelter, where sunlight hits directly, is melting. Tiny rivulets of water run down the walls, freezing again when they reach shadow, but melting and dripping where the sun touches. The sight fills you with unexpected emotion. Water flowing. Liquid water. It seems like a miracle after months of everything frozen solid. Thomas Fletcher examines the dripping water with a critical eye. "We'll need to manage the thaw carefully," he warns. "If we get rapid melting, we could face flooding in the shelters. We need to dig channels to direct meltwater away from our foundations." He's right, and work begins immediately to prepare for spring thaw. Channels are dug through the snow around each shelter. Drainage areas are established where meltwater can pool without threatening structures. The preparation proves wise. As March progresses, temperatures rise. Not to warmth by any normal measure, but to levels that allow significant melting during the brightest part of each day. The landscape begins to transform. Snow retreats from southern-facing slopes. Dark patches of earth appear. Ice on the river develops wet spots and cracks. The first bird arrives on a morning in late March. A raven, black against the white landscape, circling above the settlement before landing on the roof of the storage shed. Its call, harsh and loud, breaks the winter silence. Colonists emerge from their shelters to stare at the bird in wonder. "Life returns," Margaret Walsh says softly, watching the raven preen its feathers. "The world remembers us." More birds follow in the coming days. Ravens, a few smaller species that dart quickly through the air. Their presence changes the soundscape. The winter silence gives way to calls, chirps, the flutter of wings. Peter Morrison reports that the ice fishing holes are becoming unreliable as ice thickness varies. "The ice is breaking up from below," he explains. "The river is waking up. Soon we won't be able to fish through ice anymore, but we'll be able to use nets and lines from the bank." The changes accelerate as April arrives. Rain falls for the first time since autumn, a cold rain that melts snow rapidly. Streams form overnight, cutting channels through the white landscape. The frozen river groans and cracks, enormous sheets of ice shifting as the current beneath gains strength. One morning, you walk to the river and discover that large sections have broken free. Dark water flows between ice chunks that shrink visibly as you watch. The sound of moving water after months of silence seems almost overwhelming. William Bradford declares a holiday of sorts, allowing a day of rest and celebration. "We have survived," he announces. "Against odds that would have broken lesser people, we have survived. Now we build." That evening, the settlement gathers for a feast. The remaining caribou meat is prepared in a stew with precious vegetables from storage. Margaret Walsh even produces a small amount of dried fruit saved for a special occasion, distributing it among the children. As you eat, sitting close to the fire, Sarah Miller approaches with baby Daniel. The child has grown remarkably, thriving despite the harsh conditions. Sarah's face shows exhaustion but also pride. "I wanted to thank you," she says quietly, "for everything you did during the illness, for keeping the fires burning, for bringing back the caribou meat. My son lives because of people like you." You accept her thanks awkwardly, uncomfortable with praise. But her words touch something deep inside. This is why you stayed. For moments like this, where simple survival becomes shared triumph. The feast continues late into the night. Someone produces a small wooden flute and plays simple melodies. A few colonists dance, their movements stiff after months of being bundled in heavy clothing, but joyful nonetheless. Children laugh and chase each other between the shelters, their energy boundless now that the worst cold has passed. William Bradford stands at one point, raising a cup of melted snow water. "To those we lost," he says, "Richard Cooper, Elizabeth Turner, and the 3 who fell on the voyage. They rest in this land they helped us claim. May their sacrifice be honored by what we build here." Everyone drinks, the moment solemn but not sad. The dead are honored by the living continuing forward. As the celebration winds down, you step outside into the cool night. The air feels almost warm compared to the brutal cold of deep winter. Stars shine brilliantly above, and the moon illuminates a landscape transforming before your eyes. You realize that you've made your decision. You will stay. This land has tested you, shaped you, and ultimately accepted you. You belong here now in a way you never belonged anywhere else. The decision to stay is not unique to you. Over the next week, as William Bradford asks each colonist individually about their plans, the majority choose to remain. Of the 42 survivors, 38 commit to staying through the next year at minimum. Only 4, including one family with young children, request passage south when ships arrive. 38, William repeats, a smile crossing his weathered face.
more than enough to build something lasting. Planning for permanent settlement begins immediately. Thomas Fletcher's designs evolve from sketches in snow to detailed plans drawn on precious paper. The main structure will be a large communal building with individual family quarters branching off. Smaller structures will house workshops, storage, and a dedicated building for sick care. "We'll use stone from the hills," Thomas explains, pointing to a ridge where exposed rock is visible now that snow has melted. "The foundations will be deep enough to survive frost heaves. The walls will be double layered with insulation between. And every building will have a proper chimney with a design that maximizes heat while minimizing smoke." The Morrison brothers finalize their fishing plans. "We'll build a proper dock when the river clears," Peter says, "and we'll construct fish traps in the shallows. Between the traps and nets, we should catch enough fish to feed the settlement and have surplus for trade." Margaret Walsh organizes a group to prepare for planting. They identify a sheltered area with southern exposure where the growing season will be longest. "It won't be easy," she warns, "but if we select the right crops and protect them carefully, we can produce food here." You take on the role of expedition leader, organizing trips to explore the surrounding territory. These explorations reveal resources that will be crucial for permanent settlement. Stands of timber larger than the stunted trees near the original camp, deposits of clay suitable for pottery and bricks, and even a natural spring that flows year-round. By mid-May, the landscape has transformed completely. Snow remains only in the deepest shadows. Green shoots push up through dark earth. The river runs full and free, its banks lined with emerging vegetation. The air carries scents of wet soil, new growth, and possibility. Construction begins on the first permanent structure. Every able-bodied colonist participates in some way. Some quarry stone from the hillside. Others haul timber from the forest. Still others prepare mortar, dig foundations, or organize supplies. The work is hard, but energizing. You can see the results of your labor taking shape. Walls rise from carefully laid foundations. Roof beams are fitted and secured. What was bare ground becomes a building. In early June, a ship appears on the horizon. The colonists gather on the shore to watch it approach. This is the moment of truth. The ship will carry news from the south, possibly supplies, and definitely the opportunity for those who wish to leave. The ship anchors offshore and a small boat rows in. The captain, a weather-beaten man named James Sterling, steps onto the rocky beach and looks around in surprise. "I expected to find corpses," he says bluntly. "Everyone said you'd never survive a winter this far north, but here you are, building in stone no less." William Bradford greets him warmly. "We survived, Captain, and we intend to stay. We have trade goods for you, furs, some preserved fish, and information about these waters that will be valuable to future expeditions." Captain Sterling's visit lasts 3 days. He delivers a small amount of supplies, letters from the south, and tools that the colonists requested before winter. He also agrees to take the 4 colonists who wish to leave, promising to deliver them safely to established settlements. The departure is emotional. Families say goodbye to friends they survived winter with. Promises are made to write, to visit, to remember. But there's also pride in the air. Those leaving know they're returning to tell a story of survival against impossible odds. Those staying know they're building something unprecedented. As the ship disappears over the horizon, William gathers the remaining 38 colonists. "Now we truly begin," he says simply. Summer in the Arctic is brief but intense. The sun barely sets, creating nearly 24 hours of daylight. Plants grow rapidly in the extended light. Fish run thick in the river. Birds nest in the surrounding hills. The settlement works tirelessly through the long days. The main building reaches completion by late July, a solid structure that dwarfs the crude shelters that saw them through winter. Individual family quarters are assigned, and for the first time since leaving civilization, colonists have privacy and space. Margaret Walsh's garden surprises everyone with its productivity. Potatoes thrive in the cool climate. Turnips grow large and sweet. Hardy greens flourish. She estimates the harvest will provide meaningful supplementation to the settlement's diet. The Morrison brothers' fishing operation exceeds expectations. They catch so many fish during the summer runs that preservation becomes a challenge. Every colonist learns to gut, clean, and salt fish. Racks of drying fish line the riverbank, filling the air with the smell of the sea. You lead expeditions farther inland, mapping the territory and claiming it for the settlement. You discover a lake 3 days' journey to the north, where waterfowl gather in enormous numbers. You find mineral deposits that might be valuable for trade. You meet, briefly, a group of indigenous people who watch you from a distance but do not approach. They're Inuit, William Bradford says when you report the encounter. They've lived here for generations, maybe thousands of years. We must be respectful, cautious, and open to learning from them. They know this land in ways we never will. As summer fades into autumn, preparations for winter begin. But this time, the preparations are confident, organized, efficient. The settlement has ample firewood stored. The fish harvest is safely preserved. The root cellar, dug deep into the earth, holds potatoes and turnips. The stone buildings stand ready to shelter everyone through the coming cold. When the first snow falls in October, you stand outside the main building and watch the flakes drift down. They look beautiful rather than threatening. You've learned the rhythms of this place. The cold no longer frightens you. William Bradford joins you, standing quietly as snow accumulates on his shoulders. "We did it," he says eventually. "Not just survived, but built something worth surviving for." You nod, watching the settlement around you. Smoke rises from multiple chimneys. Light glows in windows. Children's voices carry from inside one building where Margaret Walsh teaches letters and numbers. The Morrison brothers walk toward the river, checking their fish traps one last time before ice forms. "Did you ever doubt we would make it?" you ask. William considers the question. "Every day during that first winter," he admits. "Every single day." But doubt and giving up are different things. We doubted, but we didn't give up. The snow continues to fall, soft and steady. You pull your cloak tighter, but it's more habit than necessity. The cold feels familiar now, even comfortable. This is your home, this northern land where winter lasts 8 months and summer blazes bright for a few precious weeks. Over the next years, the settlement grows. More colonists arrive, drawn by stories of the first winter's survival. Buildings multiply, fields expand. Trade routes establish. The settlement earns a name, Hopevale, chosen to reflect the spirit that sustained it through the darkest days. You remain in Hopevale for the rest of your life, watching it transform from a desperate winter camp to a thriving community. You marry another colonist, have children who grow up thinking Arctic cold is normal, and eventually welcome grandchildren who know no other home. Sometimes, usually during storms, you remember that first terrible winter. The fear, the cold, the moment when survival seemed impossible. But you also remember the moment after the storm fell silent, when you and 43 others emerged into a white world and chose hope over despair. As you grow old, you often tell the story to younger generations. They listen with wide eyes, barely able to imagine a time when Hopevale was just crude shelters buried in snow, when survival meant counting every scrap of food, when the future stretched no farther than the next day. "How did you do it?" they ask. "How did you survive when everyone said it was impossible?" You always give the same answer. "We found hope in the endless cold.
not because the cold was kind, but because we learned that human will is stronger than any winter. The cold taught us what we could endure, and once we learned that lesson, we could endure anything. The settlement continues to thrive long after your time. Hopevale becomes a vital trading post, a fishing hub, a launching point for Arctic expeditions. The stone buildings you helped construct shelter multiple generations. The gardens Margaret Walsh planted expand into productive farms. The fishing techniques the Morrison brothers developed become the foundation of a significant industry. Historians will later debate whether Hopevale was the first successful Arctic settlement or merely one of the earliest. The debate misses the point. What mattered was not the historical record, but the simple truth that when the storm fell silent, a small group of colonists looked at the endless cold and saw not death, but possibility. That choice, repeated every day for months, transformed them from desperate refugees into founders of a new community. The cold never became warm. The winters never became easy. But the people learned, adapted, and ultimately thrived. On quiet winter nights, when the northern lights dance above Hopevale and the cold presses against warm walls, residents still tell the story of that first winter. They speak of the 7-day storm, the illness that nearly broke them, the successful caribou hunt, and the decision to stay when ships offered escape. They honor the names of those who did not survive: Richard Cooper, Elizabeth Turner, and the 3 lost on the voyage. These names are carved into a stone memorial in the center of Hopevale, a reminder that the settlement was built not just with timber and stone, but with human courage and sacrifice.
The memorial bears an inscription chosen by William Bradford before his own death. As soon as the storm fell silent, colonists found hope in the endless cold. What we built here stands as proof that the human spirit can flourish anywhere determination takes root. Those words capture the essence of Hopevale's founding. The storm could have destroyed them. The cold could have killed them. The isolation could have broken them. But none of those things happened because the colonists made a different choice. They chose to see opportunity in hardship, to find community in isolation, to build homes in a landscape that seemed to allow none. This choice ripples forward through generations. The children born in Hopevale grow up stronger for their harsh environment. The grandchildren develop innovations in cold weather construction and Arctic fishing. The great-grandchildren push exploration even further north, confident that if Hopevale could thrive, anywhere could. As decades pass into centuries, Hopevale evolves from settlement to town to small city. Modern amenities arrive: electricity, heated buildings, improved transportation. But the core identity remains unchanged. Hopevale is the place where colonists found hope in the endless cold. You do not live to see most of this evolution. Your life ends peacefully one winter night, surrounded by children and grandchildren in a warm room in the stone building you helped construct. Your last thoughts are not of fear or regret, but of profound satisfaction. You came to this land with nothing but courage. You leave it having helped build something that will outlast you by centuries. Your gravestone, placed beside those of Richard Cooper and Elizabeth Turner, bears a simple inscription: Colonist, Explorer, Founder. They found hope where others saw only cold. The story of that first winter becomes Hopevale's creation myth, told and retold until it achieves an almost legendary quality. Some details shift in the retelling. Numbers change, names are forgotten, timelines compress. But the essential truth remains: when the storm fell silent, colonists chose hope. That choice, more than any individual action or achievement, defines what Hopevale represents. It stands as a monument to human resilience,
a testament that even the harshest environments cannot defeat the human spirit if that spirit refuses to surrender. Modern visitors to Hopevale often ask to see where the original settlement stood. The location is preserved, the stone foundations of those first buildings protected from development. Interpretive signs explain the history, and during summer, actors in period clothing demonstrate the techniques the colonists used to survive. But the real story cannot be captured in preserved foundations or reenactments. The real story lives in the DNA of Hopevale itself, in the determined character of its residents, in the way they approach challenges with calm confidence born from knowing their ancestors conquered something far more difficult. When storms rage through modern Hopevale, residents barely notice. The buildings are warm, the supplies are abundant, the dangers are minimal. But the storms still remind them of those first colonists huddled in crude shelters, counting days until silence returned, wondering if they would survive to see another dawn. Those colonists did survive. They more than survived. They thrived, built, expanded, and created something lasting. Their story becomes a lesson that echoes through all of human history. Hope is not found in easy circumstances. Hope is forged in the fire of adversity, tempered by hardship and strengthened by survival. As you rest in Hopevale Cemetery, snow falling softly on your gravestone, the settlement you helped found continues its rhythms. Children attend school in buildings built on principles Thomas Fletcher first sketched in the snow. Fishermen set nets using techniques the Morrison brothers perfected. Gardens grow vegetables from seeds descended from Margaret Walsh's first plantings. The endless cold that once threatened to destroy everything instead became the foundation of something beautiful. It taught strength, fostered community, and proved that human beings can make homes anywhere their courage allows. William Bradford's words, carved in stone in the settlement center, remain as true centuries later as they were that first spring. The storm fell silent. Colonists found hope, and in that hope they found home. The Arctic wind continues to blow, as it has for millennia and will for millennia more. The winters remain long and brutal. The summers stay brief but brilliant. The land gives grudgingly, requiring constant effort from those who would draw sustenance from it. But none of that matters to the residents of Hopevale. They are the descendants, spiritual if not always biological, of people who learned to thrive in conditions that would break lesser spirits. They carry forward that legacy not through words or monuments, but through the simple act of continuing to live, build, and flourish in the endless cold. Your story, and the stories of the 43 others who survived that first winter, become the bedrock upon which Hopevale stands. Not because you were extraordinary people, though you accomplished extraordinary things, but because you made an ordinary choice in extraordinary circumstances. You chose hope, and that choice made all the difference. The snow continues to fall on Hopevale, as it has for centuries, as it will for centuries more. But now it falls on a thriving community rather than desperate shelters. It falls on warm homes rather than freezing refugees. It falls on a place where the endless cold is not an enemy to be feared, but a challenge to be met with the confidence born from knowing that your ancestors met it and prevailed. As night settles over Hopevale, lights glow in hundreds of windows. Families gather around dinner tables. Children do homework. Adults plan for tomorrow. The rhythms of ordinary life continue, made possible by extraordinary courage displayed generations ago. And if you listen carefully, when the wind blows just right through Hopevale's streets, you can almost hear echoes of that first spring. The sound of colonists emerging from crude shelters into a transformed world. The quiet conversations about whether to stay or leave. The determined voices choosing to build something lasting in a land that seemed to allow nothing permanent. Those echoes carry forward, generation after generation, a reminder that the human spirit is stronger than any winter, that hope can flourish in the coldest environments, and that the choice to keep going, even when everything seems impossible, is the choice that defines us. The storm fell silent centuries ago, but the hope it revealed in those 43 colonists still burns bright in Hopevale, a flame that no amount of Arctic cold can extinguish. That hope is your legacy, the greatest thing you helped build in this northern land. As snow continues to fall and darkness deepens, Hopevale rests peacefully, secure in the knowledge that it was founded not on favorable conditions, but on the unbreakable human will to survive, to thrive, and to find home even in the endless cold. If this story of survival, resilience, and finding hope in the harshest conditions resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel for more contemplative journeys through history's quiet triumphs. These are stories of ordinary people accomplishing extraordinary things through determination, community, and the simple choice to keep going when everything suggested they should give up. Hit subscribe and join us for more tales of human endurance in the world's most challenging environments. Thank you for listening, and may you find your own hope wherever your journey takes you.